All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another Nutanix at 9 session here with eGroup. Thank you to those of you that have been checking these out over the past couple of months. I can't even remember what number we're on at this point, but definitely excited to have everybody on board today. I'll get us started here. My name is Dan Drude. I've been hosting these over the past couple of weeks, and I've also got Mike Dent on board. So we'll do some introductions, but let me first show you kind of where we'll take you today before we dig into today's topic. So to really get us started right, I know a lot of you probably have Nutanix or looking at it pretty heavily. So we do touch a little bit on what's new. There was a big announcement this week related to the AOS software that we'll dig into with a little bit of time today. But after that, we'll go ahead and get into the questions and answers. So we got a few good questions that we had from some of you today. So thank you for submitting those. And then we were able to pull a few scenarios based on kind of some of the data protection and DR conversations that we've had here at eGroup. And then obviously at the end here, we'll tell you how you can get more info. We'll make sure to kind of pause at around 9:30 for those of you that do have to stop at the bottom of the hour here, but we certainly will keep going if there are questions. So if anybody out there is feeling brave enough, right, feel free to throw how many nodes you have in the chat box, any questions that you have off the top of your head. We'll certainly go through our agenda today, but if there's anything out there that you want to get in the queue early, please feel free to submit and we'll make sure to tackle that as they come around. So kind of just quickly on the introductions, like I said, I'm Dan. I'm one of the account execs. I'm up here in the Virginia area. I've been with eGroup for a little over a year. Mike, I'm not sure if you even need an introduction at this point, but I want to reintroduce you as kind of our Nutanix technical champion here and Director of Data Center Services. And any, I guess, new fun facts for those that have been attending over the past couple of weeks, or anything that you want to run through on your side?
No, nothing new. I just wish I kind of miss my Cinco de Mayo outfit, right? So I think I'm probably gonna have to start showing up in different outfits for these, right? I see the picture with the Hawaiian shirt on, and I like the Hawaiian shirt, so I think I'm gonna have to resurrect my Cinco de Mayo sombrero.
All right. Yeah. No, I got a few Tommy Bahamas. I'll snag one for the next session. Very cool.
Change the background to beaches.
Yes. Let's do the next one at a beach. How about that?
Yeah, that works as well.
Very cool. So, and for those of you that don't know eGroup, I was taking a look at the list earlier, and it looks like we've got a lot of our kind of eGroup fans in the mix today. So thank you for checking this out. But for those of you that haven't heard of eGroup or kind of looking to learn a bit more, I've got one slide on it, and that's all you get. But we've been around for about 20 years, privately owned, debt-free organization. We've probably got about 450 or so customers across the country with a heavy saturation up and down the East Coast. Headquartered out of Charleston, South Carolina. I'm looking forward to getting my second shot and being able to come visit you guys down at the HQ soon. So really, our focus is on speed and certainty and making sure that we are delivering proven solutions where eGroup holds that expertise. And as you'll see on that last bullet point, it's with a lot of organizations that really care about compliance. If you've got standards that you need to abide by, if you have certain SLAs, if you're really in the weeds on, hey, this cost my business X amount of dollars for this amount of time, we work really well with groups like that because of our focus on speed and certainty and making sure that you're getting your initiatives done faster and better than you might with other organizations. So appreciate those of you that have been working with us, and you can probably speak to this. But if you haven't yet interacted with the team, again, we really take pride in how we work with our customers and making sure that we drive things home for them. So before we dig into questions and answers, this might be a bit of a hard one to read. Feel free to snag a screenshot. This is also available on the Nutanix updates. So if you, I think it's Nutanix community updates. If you search AOS updates, something like that, you might be able to find it on the Nutanix portal. But we'd be happy to kind of point you towards this as well. But really, and I think I told Mike, they should have waited till tomorrow to do the 5.20 update to kind of line up with the date and be funny. But that's just because I'm in sales, and that's the kind of thing that amuses me. But this is kind of a big update, right? We're kind of 5.1 for a while with some iterations in there. Mike, what's kind of like your biggest takeaway or few takeaways with this new update on the Acropolis operating system?
Yeah, well, I think one thing to point out with this 5.20 release, this is the newest long-term support, right? So we, 5.15 had been the previous long-term support. So if you look at how Nutanix runs their code updates for AOS specifically, AOS and AHV, right? We've got long-term support and short-term support. And short-term support's typically your kind of more cutting-edge, production ready solution, right? That has a lot more of the features that roll in a lot quicker. So we're always kind of waiting for that next long-term support release. So we've been on 5.15 for a while. We saw 5.19 coming out and some of the features that were in 5.19. And then 5.20 finally hit. So we get all the benefits of 5.19 with the stability of being that long-term support. I think some of the nice features in there, some are some simple ones, right? With in the Prism interface, one of I think the best things that Nutanix has done is they now have it's a simple vertical bar on the storage utilization. It kind of tells you when you're at the tipping point of being over that node failure capability, right? If you lose a node, that you're still you still have enough storage capabilities to support a degraded node scenario, right? So it's something as simple as that we've seen it in 5.19 for a while now. It's like, oh, something as simple as that we've been waiting for. But there's a lot of great features. I mean, just on this slide, you can see there's a ton of stuff. So we see all the benefits that came with 5.19 and the earlier short-term releases that had a lot of moving features to them. But now we get that in the stability of 5.20. So I'm excited for it. I've already taken 3 clusters for customers this week up to 5.20. Again, for those of you who are out here running Nutanix, going from 5.15 or really any release in the AOS chain up to 5.20 is non-disruptive. So right, three production clusters this week already. No issues so far. So knock on wood, it holds there. But yeah, it's an exciting release. We've been waiting for it for a while now.
Nice. How many clicks did it take you, Mike? Any guess?
2, right? It's
2.
always 2.
Right.
Even though technically 5.20 is not in 1 click yet, but even with 1-click upgrades, it's still 2 clicks. But I'm not going to fault them for that. It's simple enough, right? So again, super simple. And right now, it's been the other feature, 5.20 brings the ability for right-click on certain items in Prism, right? We've never had that before. So another great feature. Now we get to right-click on objects, which is as small as it sounds. It's a big deal.
Awesome. No, so that's excellent. Thanks for that quick run through. So yeah, happy to dig in to really anything on 5.20. If you have questions on that, maybe throw them in there. We can get to them later. If we don't get to anything today, we'll certainly follow up, especially for those of you that know us. We're an open door when it comes to your Nutanix questions. So Mike, anything else from your side that maybe I didn't include? I've got the .next sign up kind of call out there. That's later this year in September, but anything else before we jump into the questions?
I don't remember if we covered it on the last Nutanix 9 session. Nutanix Move, which is their migration utility, 4.0 is out. Okay. I think we might have covered it, but again, that's got some, from a migration perspective from VMware over or Hyper-V over to AHV. They've now built in AWS and even Azure now, right? So with 4.0, we're seeing some Azure migration capability out of Azure into AHV, right? So again, the Move tool, and we might have covered this, but we could probably dedicate an entire session just to Move by itself. But a fantastic tool that they continue to develop some amazing feature sets in to make these migrations super simple. Love seeing Azure come in. Again, it gives us the full suite of migration capabilities. But can't remember if we talked about it or not, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, we did not. So I went ahead and just wrote that down. We'll have to add them in around August. I think we've got sessions scheduled out to July now, but we'll certainly dig into Move, and by that point, who knows, some of the updates and developments that we'll be able to speak
definitely
on.
Solid tool.
Yeah, if anybody's got any experience with Move, feel free to throw it in the chat. But let's go ahead and dig into some of the questions here. So this one I hear a lot kind of on the sales side, just in terms of initial conversations around Nutanix. Pretty quick answer, but I think that we can kind of dig into it in a bit more detail, right? Zerto, fantastic tool for orchestrating disaster recovery. They've got a bit of data protection now as well. And oftentimes, hey, I've invested heavily in Zerto. I'm using that as kind of like a replacement to VMware SRM tool. And can I carry that investment over to Nutanix? And the answer is maybe, right? It actually boils down to the hypervisor. So as I understand it, right, Zerto still does not work with Acropolis Hypervisor, but the standard hypervisors, VMware, Hyper-V, all that's good to go there. Anything specific, Mike, that you wanted to kind of hit on this one?
No, I mean you're spot on, right? I mean Zerto is going to work with your Nutanix, again, hypervisor agnostic to some extent, right? So Zerto is going to work with the supported platforms it works with, right? So that's VMware and Hyper-V today. Theoretically, I mean I'd be surprised if I ever came across this, but customer with a production VMware cluster on Nutanix and a DR Hyper-V cluster on Nutanix, again, Zerto can work there. It can do some cross hypervisor capabilities there, right? So, really what it boils down to, Zerto with Nutanix, absolutely. If you are a VMware or Hyper-V customer. If you are a Acropolis customer, well, we're going to fall back to data protection with Nutanix, topic of today, as well as Zyleap and some of the other, DR functionality that we have there, providing similar services and similar functionality like Zerto. But again, Zerto absolutely with Nutanix. And again, I can be Zerto with Nutanix and Zerto to non-Nutanix, or non-Nutanix, for production and Nutanix for DR, and I can use Zerto there. So again, Zerto provides that, somewhat hypervisor agnostic to some extent and platform agnostic with VMware for that DR services.
Cool. No, that makes sense. A good question. I like the tool. Zero RTO is what Zerto stands for, if you haven't caught that yet. But no, it's a great tool, and I do like to see the use case, because it's Nutanix as a high performance solution, and then Zerto on top where it makes sense. I mean, that's a pretty resilient setup there. So
yeah, definitely. Next
question. So this will we could probably dig into this in a lot of different ways, but appreciate this question. What data protection features come with Nutanix Prism that I should be taking advantage of? And I'll kind of set the stage and assume that this is just standard Prism, and we won't kind of talk about some of the other stuff. So
sure,
take it away.
So out of the box, right? So out of the box with Prism, what do I get, right? So a couple things that data protection, right, is when we look at kind of how we deploy these, and the nice thing about Prism and the nice thing about the Nutanix platform is the features that you get here are VMware or AHV or Hyper-V, kind of they're all there, right? So, I can take snapshots on the VMware side. I can take snapshots with Hyper-V, and I can take snapshots with AHV, right? That's just snapshotting the VM. We've always done that the traditional way. So that's there, right? So, but that's at the hypervisor level. So with Prism, with data protection, I've got a couple things I can do. Is I can put my VMs into a consistency group, and take basically snapshots of those VMs at a more of a storage level, right? So the snapshots, I can easily, take a snapshot, roll back, or do whatever I want at the VM level. With Prism, I get the data protection capabilities for basically snapshotting one or more VMs, or at kind of the storage layer, the storage level with Nutanix, that then allows me to replicate that to another cluster, restore if I need to. So it's more of a full scale data protection than it is kind of that quick snapshot that at least the way I use it, right, is my snapshots are, I take a quick snapshot before I'm going to upgrade something. If I'm good, I wipe the snapshot away. Data protection, I might do more of a, I've got customers that maybe don't have a full backup solution in place, that I use data protection to snapshot my VMs once every 24 hours, and I keep that within my Nutanix cluster. And that's kind of my data protection. I'm not replicating it anywhere else necessarily, but it gives me, application aware. So if I've got SQL, I can be application aware for those snapshots. Keep it on my Nutanix cluster, or like I said, replicate it over to one or more clusters. So again, just by having the Nutanix platform with Prism out of the box, I get native data protection at the VM level, right into my cluster, and the capability to replicate to alternate clusters, to a DR cluster or one or more. That data protection also provides me the ability to kind of bunker data to Azure, AWS if I want to, right? If I want to take a snapshot of those VMs and then just send it out and store it, in the cloud is kind of a more long-term retention, I can do that as well. So that's built right into the platform natively, right? So great features right out of the box.
Awesome. That's a lot in there, and I know that it's kind of built as a highly resilient solution. So I think if one of the things that we've helped customers with is simply just, hey, let's pop the hood and kind of dig into what you're doing today. Are you setting up all your policies, your protection domains, and making sure that those are actually in full effect, right? I think a lot of that stuff can. Yeah.
I'll tell you a perfect scenario where I use data protection, right? Is with Zerto, with customers, a lot of my customers that are using Zerto for replication with VMware, right? Zerto is license based. It's licensed based on the number of VMs you want to protect with Zerto. So typically, I'm protecting my core set of VMs, right? I'm not going to protect my entire scope of VMs, right? I'm going to protect the ones I really need that zero RTO for, right? To quickly do failovers. But what about other stuff I want to get? protected over to my DR environment that I don't necessarily need as that tier 0 or tier 1, right? So a lot of times I'll have Zerto as my tier 0, tier 1 solution, and then I use Nutanix data protection with VMware to at least get protection for my VMs, my lower, tier 2, tier 3, etc., and replicate over to my alternate Nutanix cluster, right? So I can move those VMs, I can replicate over. So Zerto handles my kind of the critical functionality, and then I use data protection for the lower features or the lower tiers, and that's a great combination, right? And again, data protection can do this if where data protection shines over Zerto especially is if I've got a production VMware cluster and maybe I've got a DR Acropolis cluster. Zerto's not going to work there, right? But data protection with native data protection with Nutanix can, right? I can cross hypervisor replicate. I can take those snapshots and those backups, with data protection on my primary VMware cluster, replicate that over to my AHV cluster at DR where I'm saving licensing costs, and I can move back and forth as needed, right? So native data protection, just to be clear, doesn't provide any VM automation, things like IP changes, DNS changes, or anything like that. It just kind of it moves the VMs back and forth for you, but it can do it across hypervisors as well. So a lot of functionality there that can be your primary or layered into other solutions you've got.
That's pretty cool. I know I've seen that scenario play out a bit too, where maybe you're not fully ready to jump ship on your VMware stack, right? You've got that in place. You've been using it for a while. You're comfortable with it, but in kind of the notion of, hey, let's see where we can cut costs in the business. DR, we're only planning to be over there for a couple hours, half a day, something like that, and we know that the apps can run on Acropolis. So maybe we test the waters out. Maybe we do, and I know everybody does this, right? They do DR test every quarter, but being able to use AHV is kind of that second site and use it in that sense. Later on, that then becomes the production infrastructure, right? You're able to kind of phase it out completely. Use that DR as kind of like the toe in the water. But then maybe down the road, come renewal time, all right, we're going full AHV. I've already got it. Let's use move. We referenced that earlier, and convert production.
Yeah, I mean, here's another use case, right? Is AHV today does not allow you to migrate VMs from AHV cluster to AHV cluster, right? So if I've got a primary cluster and a DR cluster, or even just I'm standing up another cluster in my primary environment, right? I can't, in the VMware world, I can have two clusters underneath vCenter and kind of, cross either cross vCenter vMotion or just vMotion from cluster to cluster, right? Well, AHV, I can't do that, right? So what in the AHV world, and we're going through this with a customer right now, there's a new production cluster coming online, and their legacy cluster is going away. And so we're using data protection to actually migrate the VMs from one cluster into another, right? So again, a lot of features and functionality there that give you the protect. It's not just protection, right? It's migration, it's DR, there's a lot of stuff that comes natively with Prism on a Nutanix platform, regardless of hypervisor, that everybody gets from day one, that they can take advantage of from day one with minimal uplift, minimal cost, almost zero cost, really, and again, just built right into the platform itself.
Awesome. Good stuff. This kind of ties into, I'm looking at the preview on the next slide here, so I'm going to go ahead and hop over to the next question, one of the ones that was submitted by one of our attendees today. So thank you for this one. I kind of added a few words and threw it into a question, but I know that there was some interest around, setting up replication across clusters. Are there best practices? How do you do this maybe for a 2-cluster scenario versus a 10-cluster scenario? Let's dig into just kind of the replication aspect of this a bit, if we can.
Yeah, so when we set up replication, it's as simple. I mean, it's once if you've gone through Nutanix setup, right, you already know how simple the platform setup is, and kind of moving through Prism and some of the other functionality and features that it's got. Setting up replication, right? It's as simple as, what's nice about Nutanix replication is, in one cluster, I point it to the IP address of another cluster. I don't have to provide credentials or anything. It's hey, this cluster, you can talk to this cluster, you can talk to this cluster, and we have replication, right? That sets us up as peer sites, as a remote site. I can have one or more, right? If I've got, if it's 2 sites, a primary and a secondary, easy done. If I've got 20 sites, and I want to kind of do a cross mesh replication, I can pick and choose what sites I'm going to replicate to. So I think from a best practice for setting up replication across clusters, it's going to come down to a couple of things, right? One is, what am I replicating, and what's that bandwidth going to look like, right? What's my daily change rate? Because as we look at what we're doing, right, as we're taking those snapshots, I've got to send data across my wire, right? So just like any, and this isn't specific to Nutanix, but any replication technology, what's my bandwidth between sites? What's my daily change rate? Things like that. Am I doing kind of async, where I'm going to take that snapshot and send it across, or am I doing something like near sync with Nutanix, where it's a much lower RPO RTO, and I'm shooting more snapshots across, or lightweight snapshots across? So when we talk to customers about best practice for setting up replication, it's going to be, what are we going to replicate? To where are we replicating, right? Are we replicating within the same data center, which is also, doable, right? No reason not to. Are we sending it across the wire, to an alternate site or sites? And what's the ultimate goal of that replication, right? Is it just to kind of bunker have a copy of that VM, or copy of the file server, right? Didn't even talk about that, right? Nutanix files. Am I just bunkering Nutanix files to an alternate site? And what kind of automation do I need? Because that automation kind of leads us into the variety of replication strategies with Nutanix as well, right? So best practice, I think that's kind of a loose term, or a loose kind of way to say, we got to make sure we've got bandwidth. Do we have enough capacity on the other side? What are we really replicating? I think there's a lot to dive into that I don't know if I could specifically say, here's like the 4 best practice things to do, right? Really, it's going to come down, bandwidth, capacity, and what's the ultimate goal for replicating? It's kind of a long-winded answer to say, probably it all depends, right?
Yep.
From a best practice perspective.
Yeah, I would say best practice is to use it, right? And then we got to dig into the details.
If you've got 2 clusters, replicate data between 2 clusters, right? I mean, Nutanix files is a great example. I've got a file, if I'm doing files in one cluster, and I've got a DR cluster and VMs, replicate files over to that other cluster as well. Easily click, one-click migration button for your file servers as well. So a lot of things go into that replication. Again, some of it's specific to Nutanix, some of it's specific just what are you trying to replicate, and what's your end goal at the end of the day? What's your goal of replication?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, shameless plug here, certainly reach out to us if you're trying to navigate, how to go about that. Obviously, you're looking at the right direction, right? If you're looking to set up replication across clusters, it's a tool that's included. It's got a lot of availability just in terms of what it can do for you. But this is a conversation that we have all over the place. And I had mentioned, the different industries that we work with: legal, finance, healthcare, manufacturing, right? Different objectives, different SLAs for different organizations, different workloads. So we're happy to kind of help dig into that, understand what your objectives are. Is it within the realm of reason with what you currently have, to your point around like bandwidth and availability on that end from a resource perspective? But how do you set that up, and how do you maintain that? I think that's another piece, and that's something that we've got customers where we help manage their Nutanix, right? And checking up on, are we hitting our SLAs? Are we hitting kind of the objectives that we have in place from a data protection perspective? That's stuff that we can kind of keep an eye on, right, day to day with the customers that we do help in terms of like a managed Nutanix, for example. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Any additional questions on that? Feel free to throw them in the Q&A here. Let's dig
I'd
into
say one topic real quick, Dan, that I probably want to clarify here is when we're talking about replication with Nutanix at the Nutanix level, using native Prism functionality or native Nutanix functionality, it does mean we do have to have Nutanix on both sides, right? With Zerto, for example, with Zerto and VMware, I can be a Nutanix cluster on one side, a SimpliVity cluster on the other side, right? At the VMware level, I'm just replicating between VMware environments, right? But when we get into talking Nutanix specific replication, it does need to be Nutanix at each site, right? It doesn't matter what hypervisor it is, right? It can be AHV and VMware, or across clusters. But I do have to replicate Nutanix to utilize the native Nutanix tools for this type of replication. Just wanted to clarify that, because I'm not sure if it comes across as clear when we have Zerto kind of in the mix as well, right? But with Nutanix, it's got to be Nutanix on each of the sides for replication.
That's a great point, and I think an example of that. Hey, we've got a production infrastructure refresh, and maybe production infrastructure is 5 years old. It's
Right.
getting a little long in the tooth, but certainly could last for maybe another 2 years or so, 3 years, and let's kick production, 3-tier, maybe it's servers and storage sitting on VMware or something like that, and we'll kick that over to the DR site. We'll upgrade production with Nutanix. That internal, or I guess the native Nutanix tools would not be as beneficial at that stage, but you would still probably rely on your backup solution or a Zerto to handle the orchestration.
Exactly. So that kind of, it does, I guess you could say it does lock you in a little bit, right? Because if you're going to do that specific scenario, right, and have a 3-tier that you're going to kind of move over to DR, and you want to go AHV at production, right? That is going to limit you what you can do from a replication perspective, right?
Yeah.
Or from a DR strategy, right? So you got to kind of plan that one out as well. And I think that's a lot of times why we see, the AHV movement aligned with clusters at both sides.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm not ready to give up VMware at my primary site, but DR, I can go AHV, right? I kind of can't go the opposite way and go AHV at my primary site, but want to use VMware, but on 3-tier at my DR site. There's going to be some hurt feelings there when we come to that final solution.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I'm looking at the next question. So this will probably be a lengthy one. So we're not quite at 9:30, but I am going to just hit our kind of quick 9:30 note real quick before we dig into it, because we'll probably blow right by 9:30. So
yeah,
for those of you that do have to drop at 9:30, if you got other commitments, anything like that, thanks again for checking this out. I did want to say, keep an eye out for Leanne Thomas. She's our business development specialist here at eGroup, and she can reach out to help schedule what we call a Nutanix health check, where we'll take a look at existing installs and help kind of navigate through that. We've got a checklist of things that we can dig into offline on that. But if you aren't using Nutanix today and are interested in doing so, let us know. We've got a whole data center optimization assessment that we can run through, kind of how that works for your organization. It's something that you're probably somewhat used to in terms of exchanging our vTools, vCenters, collecting information. We'll kind of compute and put together some solutions and all that. But from an eGroup perspective, there's a few extra deliverables on that end that make it really easy to kind of present a solution to finance, to C-level, to people that may not be in the weeds on technology like you are. So keep an eye out for that. And again, if you have to drop at 9:30, just thank you for checking us out today, and feel free to throw questions offline if you got them. But did want to call that out real quick and navigate back to our question here. This one I think comes up all the time, right? And you touched on it a little bit, Mike. What backup solutions are available for Acropolis? We could probably rattle off, I think even the legacy vendors, your Commvaults, right? Like Veeam, groups that have been around for at least 10 years, they've got Acropolis solutions. But like from an eGroup perspective, what are you seeing and what are we focusing on?
Right. So I think our top two, right, in this world, especially for Acropolis, right? And as you said, there's a lot of vendors out there that are doing Acropolis today. Some a little more than others, right? We kind of go to the legacy Veeam, right? If you've been in a virtualization world, Veeam has come across your desk at some point in time over the last 10, 15 years. Maybe 15 is a little too much, but at least in the last 10, 12 years, Veeam's been around, right? Veeam is now supporting Acropolis, and they've got the capability to do AHV backups. For eGroup internally, right? Our whole mantra is that speed and certainty, right, with data center and cloud. So we have to find solutions that really map to those really well, right? So our top two there are going to be Rubrik and Cohesity, right? They're the hyper-converged, the hyper-converged backup appliance, right? When we look at other things, Veeam and Haiku, Avamar, insert other backup stuff here, right? There's their backup software, and then there's the backup storage, right? And with Rubrik and Cohesity, we see the conversion, the hyper convergence of those, right? Of the software and the appliance, the storage into one, right? So really, I love what they're doing from the perspective of again, kind of hypervisor agnostic. I can back up VMware, I can back up physical machines, I can back up AHV hosts, right? The one thing we don't see with them necessarily is being able to crossover, right? So go from I take a VMware backup and I can restore that over to AHV, right? We're not there yet. But again,
Yeah.
the backup solutions for Acropolis, I'd say in the last 2 to 3 years have really come on strong, right?
Yeah.
When we kind of look at where it was some Haiku was kind of the initial, one of the early ones. Commvault was, I think, Comtrade. Again, there's a number of them out there. But we've really seen kind of the rubric and cohesivity really take hold with Acropolis, with AHV as well in the last couple of years. Giving us a really good kind of cross hypervisor, multi-environment approach with this. There are still some limitations of what you can do from a restore perspective with AHV. With VMware, with rubric and cohesivity, I can do live mounts, where I mount that storage, I mount that VM up on the appliances themselves, present it back as storage to the VMware host, and my VM's instantly back on, right? There are some limitations with AHV currently that Nutanix is working with the backup vendors to address. So in the case of AHV, if I need to do that restore, it's more of a full restore rather than instant on. But again, we know that's on the roadmap. Nutanix is addressing it. So there's a lot of backup solutions, right? It's going to be what matches with you. We're finding that the traditional VMware backup solutions in the Dell EMC world, they're probably not going to come around to be supporting Acropolis or AHV much these days, right? If I ever see Avamar or IDPA from Dell EMC actually supporting AHV, I'd be surprised, right? But there's a lot of other vendors out there that are supporting AHV and supporting AHV really well as a first class hypervisor these days. Yeah,
and I think it's a testament, right? I run into it a lot. We didn't go with Nutanix, or we're not comfortable with their hypervisor. It's not baked, whatever, right? But you almost don't have to answer that and just say, well, look at the ecosystem that's growing around it. To your point, it's not there yet. VMware has been around for about 20. VMware can buy a drink. It's been around for about 21 years or so. Acropolis maybe 8 to 10.
So more like 5 to 7. Yeah, I mean, even on, but still. We're seeing a lot more vendors start to treat AHV as that first class citizen, and rightfully so, right? I mean, I could go back years and say, well, when are you going to support AHV? When are you going to support Acropolis? Well, I'll support Acropolis when it gets more than 2% of the hypervisor market, right? And that was years ago. But if we look at what we're seeing now, right, we're having more conversations around why VMware, when I can just do Acropolis, right? So the conversation is shifting of, I'm VMware, why Acropolis? The conversation is now, why VMware when I can do Acropolis? I've already got it. When I've got AHV right out of the box, right? So again, I think the conversations are great. Love seeing more and more vendors coming into play here, specifically supporting AHV.
Yeah. And we actually just got an awesome question. Mike, thanks for throwing this in here. Another Mike. So Mike Dent, I'm going to read this one out because I think this is really pertinent. Excuse me. So with Acropolis Hypervisor not being on the Zerto roadmap, what does the landscape look like for zero RTO solutions? The example is they're running 3 production Nutanix clusters with VMware and looking to convert to AHV towards the end of 2022. So that's a great question. Thanks for submitting that.
Yeah, I went ahead and published that. So it is a great question, right? So what Nutanix is doing is they've got what's called near sync, right? So Zerto is that constant stream replication, right? If we look at what Zerto does and how the IO path works on the VMware side, it's that constant stream replication. It's not snapshot based at all. So what Nutanix is doing is they use what's called near sync, which uses lightweight snapshots, which gets you down to like that minute RPO, right? RPO and RTO very low from the Nutanix perspective, which is basically just the snapshots are just the metadata of changes that are being shipped over from the lightweight snapshot perspective. So again, I can get down to very low RPO and RTO values with AHV, still providing Zerto-like functionality, right? But maybe not necessarily down to that 3-second or 8-second RPO that Zerto gets you to. But again, it's getting very low, and again, we're starting to see more and more customers realize that maybe that zero RTO isn't that necessary, but very 1 minute RTO still meets the needs that they have, right? So we're able to get and this is kind of, we didn't really touch on this, but native out of the box data protection with Nutanix, right? It's that 60 minute down to 15 minutes, right? Or somewhere in that range, right? But with near sync and the replication we can do with Leap with AHV, we're down into that 1 minute, that 60-second type window. So we're seeing a lot more customers realize that, hey, that is financially doable for our organization, right? That amount of RTO is good for us. So I think that's where we're starting to see a lot of customers go. And so AHV's got that built into it. And again, we can do near sync with VMware as well. But really from the AHV perspective, that near sync functionality that's built into Prism and Prism Central gets us that lower RPO and RTO that we're looking for to kind of go to bat against Zerto in the AHV world and make it a valid solution. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. The yeah, and that also kind of digs into also what are you looking for from like a recovery point objective, right? Because I know, like you mentioned, Zerto, you get down to every 3, 5, 8 seconds if need be. If you're doing something highly transactional, if you've got data that's changing constantly, I don't believe that Nutanix is there yet, right? In terms of kind of those seconds on like sub 10-second kind of RPO scheduling.
Yeah, I mean, it's getting there, right? I mean, near sync, we can get down really low with near sync. I mean, we're down, like I said, we're down into the low minute to minutes, right? Okay. So again, I think it's business specific, right? Now, what we don't, I guess one way to look at this as well is what we're still kind of looking for is that metro style sync with AHV that we have with VMware today that gives you more of that true zero RPO, right? Where I've got it's more of a stretched cluster to some extent where I can have kind of if my primary side fails, my VMs are immediately powered on the DR side. But with the lightweight snapshot capability, right? Again, we're getting down to that closer and closer to that zero RPO and RTO. We can get close to zero RPO with like 5 milliseconds latency, right? 20-second RPO for kind of scenarios where I don't have latency, if I've got maybe higher latency. So again, we're getting there, right? Near sync has provided a lot of capabilities for AHV to get down to those really low numbers. Yeah,
no, good stuff and great question. And I'm also thinking with the timeline that was mentioned, right, end of 2022. Certainly keep an eye on kind of the developments around Zyleap, and we'll dig into Zyleap a little bit more today. But yeah, thanks again for that question. Good stuff. Let's go to that. This one looks like it's going to be pretty quick. Are snapshots reliable on Nutanix? What do you think, Mike?
Absolutely, absolutely. God, that's one of the things that I show customers. In some cases, I've got a VMware customer that says, "Oh, I love my snapshots." Well, that's great. And let's talk about snapshots in general, right? For VMs, right? With VMware snapshots, right? You shouldn't have a large chain of snapshots, right? You shouldn't run VMs on snapshots for longer than 72 hours typically, right? It's bad. It's just bad practice in general. So there's a lot of things with VMware that the snapshot functionality is just not ideal, right? There's some limitations. If you break the chain of snapshots, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, disk consolidation, things like that. With Nutanix snapshots, right? One of the beauties of them is it's copy on write, right? So what that means is when I take that snapshot, I'm not running these Delta disks, right? I don't have these crazy chains of disks that I can take 10 snapshots with Nutanix. And let's say I'm going to delete snapshot 4, 5, and 6. I can still restore myself to snapshots 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, right? So I'm not building a chain of snapshots with Nutanix that I have to kind of work through and really care about. So a lot of times what I'll tell customers, even whether you're VMware or AHV, I like Nutanix snapshots because I don't have this chain of custody with snapshots that I have to worry about, the Delta disks that VMware has, and then going through that disk consolidation. I had a customer a couple weeks ago that was doing a Zerto failover test, and they had a lot of VMs that were running on snapshots, and it took 18 hours to consolidate all of the VMware disks during a Zerto failover, right? So that's painful, right? Yeah. So if I get out of these snapshot chains and make it a little bit easier, it's wonderful to have the snapshot capability that Nutanix provides.
Awesome. Good stuff. Looks like everybody's coffee's kicking in. Mike, if you want to take a quick look at the chat, Ron, I see you in there. Thank you for throwing some notes in there. Ron Trimble,
Yeah.
if you don't know him, he's on the Nutanix side, but look him up on LinkedIn and endorse him for being smart. He's a big fan of eGroup, and we're a big fan of his. But we did get another question around Zerto, or I guess an extension of the Zerto conversation here. So as we know, right, there's a lot of orchestration, there's a lot of testing capabilities. Reporting for those tests, you can kind of get your DR. Hey, we did the DR test. It gives you a nice report. You stick it on, management's desk and say we're good for this quarter. Any sort of reporting, testing type stuff on the roadmap for Nutanix that kind of matches what we know you can do with Zerto?
Yes. So with Leap on-prem, which is Leap on-prem is when we look at data protection with Nutanix, there's kind of the two levels, right? There's data protection that everybody gets out of the box that has no VM automation, that has no kind of workflow automation, right? When I fail over, it's the VM goes and everything stays the same. When we look at Leap on-prem, which is the more advanced replication strategy and functionality with Nutanix, that provides that VM automation, that provides the changing of the IP addresses and so forth that we need to do to map to the DR site. So to the question of testing, recovery, and reporting for the tests, absolutely. I can do the same exact type of functionality testing that Zerto provides, where I fail over into my bubble. I can test my VMs, things like that. When I'm done, I trash them and so forth. I can do that with Leap on-prem as well, with AHV and ESXi, with VMware as well, since it supports both products. I can do that test failover and have my VMs in a bubble, test them out. Do they come up? Do the IP addresses change? And do I have some level of connectivity? And then trash that when I'm done. So absolutely, it provides the same level of recovery recovery testing, and then reporting off those tests that we've come to expect with Zerto. So we've got that today available to us with the Nutanix more advanced, advanced replication, or Leap on-prem is variety of names, but with that advanced replication, we do have that full capability. If I'm just doing data protection, I don't necessarily get the same testing recovery, because now I can't really fail those VMs over in a test bubble, right? I'm migrating the VMs from one side to another. Great question, though. Great question. Yeah. Because and honestly, that is one of the things that when we look at Zerto versus kind of some of the native Nutanix replication, that a lot of people love the capability for doing testing of recoveries, right? To be able the ability to say, I'm going to fail this, test fail over this VPG while my production systems continue to run. So we get that with the advanced replication that Nutanix does provide.
Very cool. No, so thank you to another Mike for that question. Mike Den, are you just running like Mike bots? Is this where we're getting our questions?
It's a Mike day. I'm happy to hear from those two Mikes any day. So
I'm Mike Drude. Yeah. We're all Mikes. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for throwing those in there. Let's dig in. I think we've got one more question that was formally submitted, but again, keep them coming if you got anything in there. This is probably a broader topic that we could spend an entire session on, but how do you back up? Yeah. How do you back up Nutanix to the cloud? And I guess let's kind of start like what native or included features out of the box, do you have that can integrate with maybe an AWS or an Azure or even a GCP?
So there's couple ways to look at this, right? One, if I just need to get my VMs out, right? Say I don't have a fancy backup solution that can do cloud replication, right? Say I've got some old school backup solution and it just keeps me on-prem. Natively within Nutanix, I can take snapshots of those VMs and I can archive those up to the cloud, right? I can take that snapshot that I've been taking on-prem. I can take that snap and replicate it out to AWS, Azure, et cetera. So that's low hanging fruit. That's just data bunkering, right? That provides me no automation or really capabilities to restore somewhere else. Kind of going to the next phase there, right? So how do I back up Nutanix to the cloud? I can use the Nutanix DR services Leap, right? So you heard me talking about Leap on-prem just on the last slide. It's one of these that with Leap, and apparently my dogs are going crazy now. That's always fun during a webinar. Leap is the Nutanix provided DR service where I can take those VMs that are in my Nutanix cluster on-prem, replicate that into the Zylib cloud, and have DR functionality there. So if I don't have a DR site, I can use Zylib as my DR site, or maybe it's a secondary DR site where my VMs are replicated there, and VM automation fails over, things like that. That allows me to have that DR capability. So that's kind of phase part 2, right? And then finally, we have Nutanix clusters, right? Nutanix clusters takes kind of that even further, where I have the ability to run a true full-blood Nutanix cluster, bare metal, within AWS or Azure in the future, where now all of a sudden I've got my on-prem cluster, I've got my DR, or maybe a test dev, or maybe another prod cluster that lives in a public cloud, and I can use data protection. It's just like another Nutanix cluster, on-prem or not. I can use regular data protection. I can use the more advanced replication to get to the cloud. So again, I've got multiple ways to get to the cloud, and again, depending on what that really means is going to be different for everybody. But I've got multiple avenues to use Nutanix provided functionality right out of the box, or with some more advanced capabilities to utilize the cloud as either a data bunker, a DR strategy, or a full-blown Nutanix cluster as well.
Awesome. Good stuff. And it sounded like your dogs agreed with you on all that. So that's that's always good validation.
They're quiet for the first 35, 40 minutes of this, and then all of a sudden they go crazy.
Very cool. I don't believe we have any additional questions on our side. So I'll go ahead and throw Leanne's info back up. Again, if you have any questions on like the health check or the data center optimization, keep an eye out. She'll be reaching out. If you work with eGroup currently, just reach out to your account exec. Hopefully, you know them. They've done a good job and you remember their name and what they do for you. But I'm sure they've taken care of that. But if there's nothing else, any kind of closing statements or anything that you want to kind of cap this off with, Mike?
I'd say, from this conversation, right, data protection and disaster recovery, we probably could have broken this down into just a data protection topic and just a disaster recovery session. I love where Nutanix is going with AHV, and not just AHV, but some of the capabilities that we've got across the board, right? We've got with Leap, right? Not the advanced replication, not just supporting AHV, but supporting VMware, right? Or providing me the ability to do AHV and VMware, right? And have that VM automation. So again, love where they're going with this, and I want to see it continue. And really, everybody I've worked with that is using AHV in these environments, the features and functionality that they've got with replication, with their DR strategy, is just as simple as they're used to with the rest of the Nutanix platform, which makes it even better, right? It's not cumbersome, it's easy to use, and it just makes sense.
Awesome. Well, very good stuff, Mike. Thank you as always for joining me on our morning ramblings. We'd probably do this normally without the camera, so thank you for those of you that have decided to come in and watch the live stream. But yeah, again, if you have any questions, again, eGroup's contact info is up here. Follow us on LinkedIn. Check us out on Twitter. I sound like a YouTube person right now. But we post a ton of this content. We host these sessions every other week. Over the next few weeks, we're actually going to have a customer feature on one of our customers that supports public safety systems across the country. So when we're talking mission critical, we're talking, making sure 911 works. So keep an eye out for that one. And then we'll be digging into really a whole slew of topics around the different hardware vendors, different capabilities across Nutanix. We'll be getting back into the Edge portfolio. But if you have any ideas, any additional questions, feel free to reach out. Again, I'm Dan. I had Mike Dan on board as my co-host today. And we just wanted to thank you all for coming and listening to the show. Have a good one.
Absolutely. Dan, it was always a pleasure.
Certainly. My pleasure. See you, everybody.
All right. Take care.